Welcome back to part 2. I'm back from vacation and it's time to continue with some more modded Minecraft. Since last time the video's blown up and since so many of you guys subscribed, I'm going to announce the first sub goal in this channel's history. If I pass threefold in subscribers, I will play GTNH until I either beat it or physically can't anymore, and that is a promise. So last time I explained the journey it was getting into E2E, losing a playthrough, coming back again to build this tiny house, and then eventually growing out of it to build my current facility. At the end of last episode, I fixed all of my power and resource problems with an auto-sieve setup and a deuterium-based fusion reactor, so now, let's continue. With no maintenance, this fusion reactor was now producing 440,000 RF a tick. I could finally retire my fission reactor, which I had been manually filling with fuel to kickstart machines. I could also stop maintaining the gas turbine setup since I designed it so badly. Idiot. So next on my mid to late game to-do list is titanium, since I thought I should try to finish the Gates questline and unlock Draconic evolution so that I can begin working on my first creative items. But with that finished, I could use this power to move into a much more energy intensive mod that I was for once slightly familiar with, Ender.io. To start the mountain of a task it was to get to Ender.io, I needed a faster version of the Empowerer since getting titanium and all the infrastructure before that needs empowered crystals and these cell frames, so it was time to make the combination crafter. Looking at the recipe, the main thing is crystal tine ingots, which among other things need an elite crafting table. For an old reactor that I used temporarily, I did get the basic crafting table, but I needed the advanced crafting table with this crafting chain, and the 4 hardened and 2 signalum cell frames that are both part of a much larger crafting tree that we will see a lot later, so I'll explain it now. To start, we duplicate machine frames with UU matter and add redstone in the metallurgic infuser. Then add all 4 of these materials in an empowerer to make the hardened frames. Then I need to use our old friend the fluid transposer to take destabilized redstone and put it over electrum and diamonds to make flux crystals and fluxed electrum, used in these parts of the recipe. After that, we need to wait a minute for the fluid transposer to put 4 ingots of this alloy called lumium into the cell frame to finally be upgraded again with all of this stuff that doesn't actually matter except for the resin that has its own factory. Then into the induction smelter with 40 blocks of redstone for 2 minutes to finally make 1 signalum cell frame. And after building all of that, along with some alloys that don't matter, I present to you the elite crafting table. Just a crafting table, but bigger. It only took up until... Now back to the combination crafter. All I had to do at this point was make the crystal tine, which is easier than it looks, and then get the hundreds of black iron for the pedestal since I was going for a max size setup. So I automated the induction smelter and coated it with the most expensive black iron recipe using a block of invar and black quartz to make 2 ingots, which is way worse than the alternatives, but I had too much black quartz and I didn't want to automate anything for the others, so I didn't. I got all the black iron and immediately dumped it into the carpenter with liquefacted coal to make all the components, and then placed them all together with the extended crafting tables on the endgame floor. That was a huge distraction from the main goal, which is modularium automation, but it was worth it since I tried making modularium near the end of the first attempt and it absolutely sucked. Also, there were all of these recipes that the combination crafter could do, and it would be important for later. The next day I planned my first weird factory. This setup is weird since I can't use one interface to go into all the pedestals at once, unless I knew about item lasers, but how I made it work is by outputting into this chest and then using tons of filters in pipes going into 4 of the pedestals since I only needed 4 for automation, and then pull out the item using another filter just for these outputs. Finally, we can get the advanced metallurgic fabricator for actual titanium production. For this, I made 2 machines from Gendustry, and at the time of making the metallurgic fabricator, you only needed glowstone or redstone for mutagen instead of plutonium like it is now, and I made lots of mutagen for this part of the multi-block. Then the 6 fiery blocks. In case you don't know, fiery metal is a powerful material added by the Twilight Forest mod that needs fiery hydra blood or Urgas tears. To save the explanation, those are 2 mid-game bosses in the Twilight Forest which have a chain of requirements to reach that include other bosses, all within the Twilight Forest dimension. Getting there wasn't that hard, but I quickly learned that I couldn't fly, so I had to resort to old technology, like walking, and touching the ground, which is made of that horrible grass. I actually ended up just using a slime sling to propel myself into a Naga lair. Then I killed the Naga, went to the Twilight Lich, killed him, which wasn't actually that straightforward since he has a shield wall and I had to deflect projectiles to destroy it. Then I killed the Phantom Knights, which are also quite difficult since I kept looking in the wrong direction while shooting. Then I finally used my slime sling to fly up to the top of an Urghast tower and killed the Urghast and took its tears. With that and all the previously auto-crafted modularium, I can assemble the Advanced Metallurgic Fabricator. But it's not done yet because now I have to make titanium. All that matters is the liquid chlorine here since everything else is easy. Because I didn't know anything about the thermal evaporation plant, I went with the more difficult route of melting salt and electrolyzing it to make chlorine. The only problem was that this meant one salt turned into 1.5 millibuckets of chlorine. I needed 500 millibuckets per titanium. So I made a chlorine factory, and before any government agency takes me away and locks me in a room, this is a video game. So then I had to make salt. Lots of salt. So much salt that I spent 30 minutes making a sink that produces 2.1 million buckets of water to my kitchen, so that I could handcraft 3 stacks of salt every second until I filled 5 of these crates, and since 4 salt makes a block, that means 1 salt is 0.25 cubic meters, and the 5 crates are storing 10,240 cubic meters, which, for my American viewers, equals 24,975,609 Big Macs, packed together perfectly in a cube, turned into salt. That's a lot of salt. So now I have carpal tunnel. Oh, and lots of titanium. Then I wanted the really efficient advanced rocketry machines, but they needed lots of expensive things, but I had most of them stockpiled except elite plating, which needed a new chemical factory since the old one wasn't automated. So I made a new one. How this absolute pile of spaghetti works is it makes sulfuric acid in this line of machines and uses water to dissolve fluorite and mix it with the sulfuric acid to make calcium sulfate and hydrofluoric acid, which I trash. The remaining calcium sulfate is crystallized and crushed for use in elite plating that I'm needing more and more now. With all that made, you get the drill. I made
many different types of machines and factories with machines in them.
The most notable of which is this arc furnace, which is really fast and gives a 4 times cheaper sand to silicon recipe, as well as a really efficient titanium aluminide recipe. Other machines include this cutting machine and the precision assembler for really fast circuit production, and these 3 machines for later. Once I had all this, I automated the machine chassis for my first Ender.io machine, the alloy smelter. Then I used it to automate industrial die blend for the industrial machine chassis, and then made more machines. So let's check on the auto-crafting section of the base, which is going great. By now I had automated a lot. What started as a cool thing I could do to speed up small tasks in one corner of my base was now spreading like a cancer of ME cables throughout my base. The auto-crafting page in storage was no longer a small grocery list, but instead a wall of machines, metals, circuits, alloys, and random garbage I only needed once. The scary part was that the tiny cave I made this in was also growing to accommodate the 40 plus machines with the crafting computers and molecular assemblers, and I needed to dedicate space and channels for molecular assemblers since I ran out of the interfaces for them and I needed them separate. So to fix this mess, I made this room with 2 very large crafting computers and possibly enough space to triple the amount of machines automated, or better, to fill it with 60 molecular assemblers and 20 interfaces. Now I need to enter Draconic Evolution and look towards the Draconic core, which needs a lot of automation, but as I just said, we can do that now. So I got together some crazy recipes, including automating nuclear waste out of a new reactor I've mentioned to automatically assemble Draconic cores in a record time of 8 seconds. So one of the last steps toward creative items is mystical agriculture, which is surprisingly easy considering how hard it was in the first attempt. Since I had mechanized the Botania setup by automating lava production for these thermal lilies, I had lots of mana to make things like terrasteel and elementium, which were both needed for the Master Infusion Stone, and it only took me 2 days to get, which after spending weeks on the factories below ground, it was kind of underwhelming. Once I had that, I made draconium seeds to make draconium without deep dark portals or other crap like that. Then I made nether star seeds and set my sights on awakened draconium seeds, which of course need awakened draconium. To get this I needed many things which normally would be quite expensive if I hadn't made Yuya matter and automated combination crafting. This was also where I finally used my Ender.io machines to make grains of the end. There was one problem which I didn't notice originally. The fusion recipe tier was Wyvern instead of the basic setup I had. How fusion crafting works is very similar to combination crafters and empowerers, except it has this long charge time since it's more advanced and made for Draconic evolution. To get to the point, it has tiers of crafting that start at basic and go to Wyvern, Draconic, and Chaotic, which also just so happen to be the 4 main tiers for all of Draconic evolution, and the tier of crafting is determined by which crafting injectors are being used. Right now my setup was using these cheap basic crafting injectors since it's so new, but I needed to upgrade them, which was difficult. Luckily, it only took 2 hours to get everything in order to make the Draconic cores required for this. Unluckily, I needed the Wyvern cores, which needed another modularium machine. Since I had made a lot of infrastructure between now and the last one of these multi-blocks, this was actually easy and I had the machine online in only 4 hours. And even made a small factory for primal mana so that I can have semi-automation for this. After messing around with nuclear waste and nether stars from the garden cloche setup, I had made 9 Wyvern cores and turned them into fusion injectors, making these 8 blocks the most expensive blocks I had so far. Finally, I made the awakened draconium and began growing it in garden cloches, which are like fields in boxes. And then, because my armor sucked, I decided I would upgrade it to Wyvern, just for fun. Not to fight anything in particular, just fun. Now with this armor, I set out to clear the gate's questline so that I could focus solely on creative equipment, and more specifically, the creative tank. The only thing stopping me was blood magic, which I did have experience with, and ended up making this massive thing to clean out that end of the quest book. And then I started to work on the ultimate crafting table. This was the culmination of all the factories I had been making for hours now, needing crystalline, advanced circuits, signalum cell frames, and advanced materials like mirian, enderium, and aethium. The first thing I needed was a better void miner, since what I was using was just a rhodium since I had upgraded it once. But now I needed to upgrade it to the chironite, palladium, and finally ionite void miners to get aethium, which would need 8,640 tin, but that could just be done with my new and improved Ender IO ore doubling, able to turn 25 ore into 50 ingots every second. The other problem was draconium crystals, which need draconium dissolved in sulfuric acid to make. So I made the chemical dissolution chamber, which I would talk about the recipe for, but I don't want to, so I won't. In the time it took to make those, I had auto-crafted everything except the void miner, and did some base building to give it the look it has now, and to integrate auto-crafting into the base more since I originally thought it would just be in the wall. With the void miner complete, I grabbed the aethium and assembled the ultimate crafting table. I'd learned every mod and even completed some. I had almost all the factories I needed and mastered auto-crafting. My base felt almost unstoppable, and it was time to truly test it against these 2 recipes, Banatoid and Anglesite. I decided to do some math and figured out exactly how much of these 2 I would need for the rest of the playthrough. My first goal for creative items was actually the creative mana pool, because I hate making mana, and I could make Banatoid much easier with it. Because of this, I was only going to make as much Banatoid as I needed, and began work immediately after making the ultimate table. There's a lot to take in here, and most of it was just like the celestial crystals here. some rock crystals that you made in large quantities with your laser drill, throw it in liquid starlight with some other easy materials that I already have, and wait. There are also other materials like the resonating gem that are easy on paper, until you realize that I need over a stack of these in the entire recipe, and I can only do 2 recipes at a time while manually refilling starlight and clicking on the altar. So things like that needed to be automated, and this requirement led to something truly beautiful. Once all the magic stuff was done, I could already make the creative mana pool, which was just more of the same at this point. This was truly a productive month. I could continue talking into the creative age, but this video is already getting quite long, and I don't want to hold you hostage for much longer, so I'll have to end it here. Thank you all for growing this channel, and thank you for your feedback and criticism on the last video.